What do you do when Hollywood finally says what everyone's been whispering? Nobody wants you here. Those words weren't shouted. They weren't written on a sign. And yet, in one surreal, slow-motion moment, they were louder than any stadium roar. It was the unspoken message that hovered in the air, thick and undeniable, as Meghan Markle was quietly, but unmistakably, escorted out of the 8th Annual Critics' Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let's get one thing straight from the jump. This wasn't a red carpet brawl, a TMZ-style screaming match, or some viral video meltdown. No, this was worse. This was the kind of rejection that happens behind velvet ropes, under chandelier lighting, and with polite smiles masking brutal truths. It was silence that screamed, backs turned, eyes deliberately not meeting hers. Security that didn't drag her, but didn't offer her a way back in, either. And when it was over, there wasn't applause. There wasn't even chaos. There was just absence. Meghan was gone, as if she'd never been there at all. But why? Why would one of the most talked about women in modern media, former royal, global brand, podcast queen, or at least she was trying to be shown the metaphorical door at a gala meant to celebrate Black excellence in cinema and television? Why this event? Why now? And most importantly, what don't they want you to know? Let's start peeling this back, layer by layer. Because what happened at that gala isn't just a celebrity mishap, it's a warning shot, a seismic shift. And if you've been following Meghan's trajectory, you'll realize this moment was a long time coming. But first, let's rewind the clock. Because before the lights, before the cameras, and before the quiet humiliation, there was a carefully laid plan. One that was meant to re-establish Meghan as a power player, not just in media or philanthropy, but in the very soul of Hollywood's activist elite. She didn't show up to the gala by accident. She showed up with intent. But did Hollywood finally call her bluff? The plan that backfired. In the weeks leading up to the gala, Meghan's PR team had been busy, very busy. Quiet calls to stylists, coordinated leaks to fashion blogs. Subtle rumors floated through Twitter and gossip columns. Meghan's about to make a statement. Meghan's reclaiming the narrative. Meghan's going to be the face of Black storytelling in Hollywood. This gala, the 8th Critics' Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV, was perfect. It was high-profile but intimate, industry-packed but not saturated with paparazzi. And it was cause-driven, meaning it carried that golden sheen of moral high ground that Meghan often leaned on. You see, she was betting on two things. Her proximity to Black identity would give her a kind of untouchable shield. Her royal aura, faded as it might be, would still impress enough to secure her place at the table. But both assumptions were about to be tested in the most uncomfortable way imaginable. Because here's what Meghan didn't count on. The room had changed. This wasn't 2020. The world had moved on. And so had the people in that room. These weren't just actors or screenwriters. These were creatives who had clawed their way into the industry. Black women who had waited years to see their stories told on their terms. Producers who had been shut out by the very system Meghan had once benefited from. And now, Meghan was walking into their space, with their spotlight in mind. The optics were questionable. Yes, she identifies as biracial. Yes, she's spoken about the struggles of being treated as a woman of color by the British tabloid press. But many in the community felt she had only embraced her Black heritage when it was convenient, when it suited a Netflix deal, a podcast pitch, or a comeback narrative. And at this gala, a space specifically curated to uplift genuine Black voices in cinema and TV, some attendees felt that Meghan's presence wasn't solidarity, it was strategy. But what about the invite? The million-dollar question. Was Meghan even invited? The truth is murky. Her name never appeared on early press releases. Insider reports suggest her camp reached out to the organizers, framing her as a potential surprise guest who could lend the event a global spotlight. Translation, she wanted in, and she wasn't taking no for an answer. Sources claim an assistant on Meghan's team applied pressure, suggesting that her attendance would elevate the gala's visibility and even hinting at future partnerships. But that's where things get slippery. Because while some higher-ups may have agreed, others didn't. Behind the scenes, tensions reportedly erupted. Some committee members were furious. One anonymous producer allegedly said, This event is for us, by us, not for someone looking to wash their image. And yet, Meghan showed up, styled to perfection, dressed in symbolic boldness, cameras trailing her every step. But the room's temperature dropped by 10 degrees the second she walked in. A smile that didn't land. On the surface, everything looked fine. Meghan smiled, posed, waved politely. She leaned into her signature charm, warm but calculated. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar face. But the red carpet was not the triumph she expected. The fashion bloggers didn't rush to praise her. The photographers gave her a few flashes, then quickly turned back to the night's honorees. And the actors she tried to approach? They nodded politely, then turned back to their conversations. If you've ever walked into a party where you weren't really welcome, you know the feeling. That eerie sense that everyone's pretending to be polite, but no one's pulling out a chair for you. That was Meghan's reality. Whispers and looks. From the moment she entered, the energy shifted. Whispers. Side glances. Eye rolls caught on video. One reporter later noted that there was more tension in the air than at a family reunion after a scandal. One actress, who had worked on a major award-winning show, was seen stiffening the moment Meghan approached her table. Another starlet, rising fast in the industry, allegedly turned her back on Meghan as she tried to join a conversation. And then there were the texts. Oh yes, the texts. Screenshots that would later leak to gossip sites showed group chats filled with biting sarcasm. Who invited her? She thinks she's the moment. Girl, not at this gala. The digital disdain was subtle but brutal, and it was building. But the final blow was silent. This wasn't going to be a public scene. That's not how Hollywood handles things, especially not the new Hollywood, where rejection is polite and cancellation is a quiet affair. The moment came quietly. A tap on the shoulder. A word whispered by someone in a suit. Meghan's assistant, pale-faced, hurrying to intercept. A short exchange. Meghan's eyes narrowing. Her smile tightening. And then she was walking. Fast. Not running. Not arguing. Just leaving. People watched. Nobody said a word. No one stopped her. But no one followed her either. She walked out alone. Why this story matters now. So why are we talking about this? Because what happened at the Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV isn't just a celebrity gossip story. It's a cultural pulse check. It's a sign that even in a town built on image and illusion, authenticity still matters. That borrowed identity, strategic victimhood, and calculated activism don't guarantee a seat at every table. And perhaps most damning of all, it shows that Meghan Markle, once the media's most sympathetic figure, may have finally run out of sympathy. Because when this community, the one she claimed to stand with, quietly showed her the exit, it wasn't about race or fame or drama. It was about credibility. And Meghan? She just lost hers. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What happens when someone walks into a room that was never meant for them? Not just uninvited. Unwanted. That's the question nobody in Hollywood wanted to ask aloud. But everyone whispered behind sequin gowns and designer smiles on the night Meghan Markle showed up at the 8th Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV. From the outside, it looked like just another gala. But inside, it was a powder keg waiting for the wrong spark. And Meghan? She was the match. Because no matter how glossy the photos, how polished the narrative, or how noble the intentions, there was one chilling truth floating through the room. She was never supposed to be there. Who controls the guest list, and who doesn't? Let's talk logistics. Every high-caliber Hollywood event runs on layers. Layers of approval, security, PR management, and, most importantly, influence. For a night like the Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV, the guest list isn't just a who's who. It's a political statement. Every seat matters. Every +1 is vetted. Every table is curated like a piece of social art. So when Meghan Markle's name allegedly popped up in a last-minute request, people started asking questions. Who approved her? The organizers? The sponsors? A rogue publicist trying to stir media buzz? Sources close to the event claimed Meghan's name wasn't on any of the original drafts. She wasn't part of the honoree slate. She wasn't scheduled to speak, present, or introduce. She hadn't worked on a qualifying film or TV project that year. She wasn't on any nomination lists. So what exactly was she doing there? That question alone lit the fuse. Backroom disbelief. Behind the scenes, the backlash started before Meghan ever stepped onto the carpet. Whispers among publicists, side eyes among stylists, confusion among attendees. She RSVP'd? Wait, she's coming. Who let that happen? A prominent black filmmaker reportedly expressed frustration to event staff just hours before the gala. I'm not here to share space with someone trying to ride our narrative. This isn't a photo op. Another insider told us. The vibe was off. The moment her team reached out, there was resistance. But nobody wanted to make a scene before she even showed up. Now let's pause here for a second and ask a real question. Why such a strong reaction to Meghan Markle's presence? Isn't she biracial? Hasn't she spoken openly about racism? Didn't she literally walk away from British royalty over identity clashes? All true. But here's where things get complicated and controversial. Convenient identity versus lived experience. Many in the black creative community have spent years building this platform, brick by brick. Long before Hollywood deemed black storytelling profitable. Long before awards shows scrambled to diversify. Long before red carpets began spotlighting melanin for optics. For these creators, this gala wasn't just another party. It was sacred ground, hard-earned, painfully built. And to them, Meghan wasn't showing up as a partner in that struggle. She was showing up as someone trying to borrow the struggle. Someone who only leaned into her identity when it was good for press. Let's be honest. When did Meghan first publicly identify as black? Was it during her Suits era? Her Vanity Fair cover? Her engagement interview? Or was it only after the palace scandal, when being black became a shield from criticism? A brand? That's the elephant in the room. Many saw her presence at the gala not as support, but as strategy. The power broker nobody noticed. Here's the twist. Meghan may have had an ally. A quiet, powerful one. Rumor has it that a certain streaming platform executive, one connected to both Meghan's past media deals and this year's award sponsors, may have lobbied for her attendance. A phone call, a gentle suggestion, a do us this favor. These things happen in Hollywood. But the problem is, influence doesn't always guarantee acceptance. In this room, credibility wasn't bought. It was earned. And the moment Meghan crossed the velvet rope, the temperature in the room dropped. Who was in the room? Let's paint the scene. Angela Bassett, Regina King, Anjanou Ellis, Sterling K. Brown, Danielle Brooks, Coleman Domingo. Every corner of the room held a living embodiment of black cinematic power. These were actors, directors, and writers who had fought against stereotypes, rejection, typecasting, and budget cuts, just to get one chance at being seen. To them, this event wasn't just glamorous. It was a homecoming, a moment to celebrate real progress. And then, Meghan entered, dressed immaculately, camera ready, head held high. But instead of applause, she was met with tension, awkward smiles, conversations that trailed off, quick glances that said, "Is she seriously here?" It wasn't a scandal yet, but it was about to be. Backstage panic. In the minutes after her arrival, things behind the curtain went into overdrive. Organizers scrambled. Staff whispered. One assistant was allegedly sent running to the back office. Someone on the security team was overheard saying, "We weren't briefed on her. What are the protocols?" Meghan's team, meanwhile, acted like nothing was wrong. They smiled. They mingled. They positioned her near the photographers. Everything about her posture screamed, "I belong here." But the room? It disagreed. A quiet war of energy. You could feel it. The shift. The subtle rejection. No overt rudeness. No one shouted. But the refusal was everywhere. A group of actresses politely declined to pose with her. A director she once met at a Netflix mixer gave her a barely there nod, then turned away. Even her attempts to start conversations were met with awkward silence or distracted nods. One woman reportedly walked away mid-sentence. It wasn't chaos. It was worse. It was Hollywood's version of exile. Polite elimination. The symbolism of space. Perhaps the most telling moment came when Meghan tried to take a seat at a mid-level industry table, only to be told, awkwardly, that the seat was reserved. For whom? Nobody ever showed up. The seat remained empty, but its message wasn't. And then came the warning. One of the most powerful voices in the room, an Oscar-winning actress known for her fierce commitment to authentic representation, reportedly approached an organizer and said, "I love what we've built here, but don't let it become another red carpet for performative activism. Protect this space." That was all she needed to say. Security was notified. An executive decision was made. Meghan wasn't going to be escorted out just yet, but the wheels had been set in motion. The message was clear. This isn't your moment. This isn't your movement. And this isn't your stage. But Meghan didn't know that. Not yet. Because while the storm was brewing inside, her next move would bring it all crashing down. She should have felt it. The glances, the stiff smiles, the echoing silence between conversations. But Meghan didn't back down. She couldn't. Because in her mind, she hadn't crashed this party. She belonged at it. Maybe even deserved to be the centerpiece. After all, hadn't she risked it all for her truth? Hadn't she been publicly dragged, scrutinized, and othered by the British media? Hadn't she cried in Oprah's garden about the loneliness of being a black woman in a white institution? Didn't that earn her something? But here, at this gala, those receipts didn't count. Not tonight. Because here, the people in the room weren't guests of a royal fairy tale. They were creators of their own crowns. And one by one, they made it clear. This wasn't her coronation. The rising murmur. As the night progressed, the murmur turned into something more potent. Resistance. Small groups huddled closer together, not letting Meghan into their orbit. Publicists watched with growing discomfort, trying to calculate whether proximity to her was a brand risk. Several stylists, spotting the rising tension, made emergency texts. Do not post her photo with our client. Pull the tag. Now. And then came the texts from inside the room. They flew faster than the camera flashes. Messages sent to friends. Screenshots snapped of Meghan's positioning. Comments like, "She really tried it. This ain't her night. Somebody better pull her before this gets messy." One recipient, an influencer with a large following, posted a cryptic tweet that would later go viral. "If you weren't part of the fight, don't show up for the parade." No names mentioned, but everybody knew. The flashpoint moment. Then came the moment that tipped the whole night over the edge. Meghan, after being quietly frozen out from most conversations, made a bold move. She walked, confidently, toward the main table. The one reserved for honorees, producers, and major award recipients. Not to sit, but to hover. She smiled, offered a light comment, reached out to touch the shoulder of a director who had just received a standing ovation for a film about intergenerational trauma in the black community. And the director flinched. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for it to be caught on camera. Enough for everyone around them to pause. To see it. Meghan's smile didn't falter, but her eyes changed. Just for a second, she stepped back, turned, and that's when he stepped in. The man in the black suit. He wasn't a bodyguard. Not Meghan's, anyway. He was Gala security. Tall, quiet, no nonsense. He approached slowly, calmly, like someone who's been trained to defuse bombs without touching them. He leaned in, whispered something into Meghan's ear. Her smile froze. Her brow twitched. And then she nodded. It wasn't a scene. It wasn't loud. But it was unmistakable. This wasn't guidance. This wasn't assistance. This was the softest, most elegant form of ejection. A message delivered in velvet. It's time to leave. Behind closed doors, the panic spiral. Backstage, it was chaos. Meghan's team was flustered. Her assistant was on the phone, frantically trying to reach their PR contact. "Damage control," she whispered. "Get ahead of this. Now." But they were already too late. Because one of the servers had recorded it. A short clip, 10 seconds. Just enough to see Meghan, standing stiff, nodding to the security guard, then turning away. No context. No screaming. Just rejection. And it was already in the group chats. Already being passed from phone to phone. One celebrity stylist posted a blurred photo with the caption, "When the energy don't match the invite." It blew up within minutes. The exit walk. She moved with dignity. Back straight. Chin slightly lifted. But her eyes were unfocused. Searching for anyone who might throw her a lifeline. They didn't. Even the press at the entrance didn't rush to capture her departure. No flashes. No shouted questions. Just silence. Her car pulled up. The door opened. And just like that, she was gone. No scandal. No tantrum. No headline-grabbing meltdown. Just absence. The absence that said everything. But let's not misunderstand something here. This wasn't about fashion. This wasn't about jealousy. This wasn't even about Meghan's royal past. This was about credibility. And who gets to claim space within a movement. Hollywood may tolerate performative activism. It may even reward it for a while. But inside that ballroom, on that night, among those people, they weren't handing out participation trophies. They were celebrating battle scars. And Meghan? She hadn't fought their fight. She hadn't bled in those rooms. She hadn't been turned away from casting calls, or told her hair was too ethnic, or been asked to tone down her dialect to make white execs more comfortable. She came from privilege, from palaces, from curated documentaries and podcast deals. And here's the twist. That very privilege, once her greatest shield, became her biggest liability. Because for this space, for this crowd, for this moment, it screamed louder than any microphone. You don't belong. But Meghan wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because while she may have been quietly shown the exit, her next move would be anything but quiet. And it would backfire in ways nobody could have predicted. She didn't stumble into the gala. She planned it. From the car ride to the cameras, from the hemline of her gown to the curvature of her smile. Every frame was calculated. Meghan Markle wasn't just attending the 8th Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV. She was staging a reentry, an image reset, a cultural reclamation. But here's the problem with staging something in Hollywood. People can smell the script. Red dress, red flag. She wore crimson. Not wine, not maroon, not some soft variation. Crimson, a color that screams attention. A color that says, I'm here, whether you like it or not. A color that cuts through muted evening gowns and respectful formal wear like a siren in a library. And let's not pretend this was just about fashion. In Meghan's world, every outfit is a statement. Every silhouette tells a story. Every accessory whispers a narrative into the press cycle. The cut of the gown? Regal, yet bold. The shoulders? Structured, powerful. The neckline? Tasteful, but not demure. Even the choice of lipstick, nails, and earrings, all engineered to project dominance dressed as elegance. She wasn't showing up as a former actress or as a royal has-been. She was showing up as a main character. But what happens when the story everyone else is telling doesn't match the one you've written for yourself? Arrival time, perfectly late. Meghan didn't arrive early. She didn't arrive with the crowd. She arrived 20 minutes after the second wave of honorees, enough to be noticed, but not so late as to seem desperate. It's a classic PR trick. Don't get lost in the mix. Enter when the cameras are ready. But the media didn't bite. Not like they used to. There were flashes, sure. A few shouted Meghan, this way moments. A couple of posed photos, curated like clockwork. But no red carpet buzz. No frantic photographers begging for a turn. No sudden hush as she stepped out of the car. It was respectful, but detached. And for Meghan, that was a warning shot. The queen without a court. She looked over her shoulder as she exited the car. No Harry. No Archwell handler. No stylist in tow. Just her and one assistant with a clipboard. And even he looked uncomfortable. Compare that to the other stars arriving. Kerry Washington with her glam team. Coleman Domingo with studio reps. Ava DuVernay surrounded by filmmakers she's mentored. Meghan? Alone. That wasn't the plan. She thought she'd own the spotlight. That her solo arrival would make her appear powerful, self-possessed, independent. But in this room, it just made her look isolated. The red carpet cold front. When Meghan stepped onto the red carpet, she did what she always does. Straight posture, wide smile, chin tilted just slightly higher than natural. She knows her angles. She knows which camera is hers. She gave them the Duchess smile, the one honed during royal walkabouts and Netflix docuseries monologues. But the photographers? Their attention drifted. A camera click here. A polite burst there. Then, back to Danielle Brooks. To Issa Rae. To the real honorees of the night. One Getty photographer, overheard later that evening, allegedly muttered, I didn't get a shot of her. Didn't think she was the story. And that's when Meghan made her first mistake. She lingered. She waited for the spotlight to come back to her. Instead, it moved on. The awkward non-moment. Meghan approached the step-in-repeat banner and stood between two celebrity hosts from a BET series. She posed, poised to flash a knowing look for the cameras. But they didn't close ranks. They didn't lean in. They didn't acknowledge her presence. So she stepped back. And the photographers, sensing the awkwardness, focused elsewhere. What was meant to be a power moment turned into a ghost frame. A woman smiling into a void that had already shifted without her. the curious glances. As she walked the edge of the carpet, Meghan scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces, looking for rescue. But no one waved her over. No one stepped out of their interview queue to greet her. A rising screenwriter, known for her unapologetically raw scripts about Black womanhood, saw her and turned to whisper something to her stylist. Both chuckled. The stylist looked Meghan up and down, not with admiration, with confusion, as if asking, "Why is she here?" And then came the snub. Meghan spotted someone she knew, a former Netflix executive-turned-producer. They'd met during the early days of Archetypes, shared a panel once, even exchanged friendly emails about collaboration. Meghan approached with a smile, genuine, this time, a bit of warmth breaking through the performance. The woman turned, recognized her, and said, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here." It was friendly, but not enthusiastic. And that didn't know line cut deeper than any paparazzi flash ever could, because it was code for, you weren't on the list. You weren't expected. You weren't wanted. Still, Meghan persisted. She launched into a comment about how proud she was of the gala, how wonderful it was to celebrate Black cinema, how important this kind of visibility was. The producer nodded politely, then looked past her, then turned. Just like that. A 30-second conversation that might as well have been a door slamming shut. Inside the venue, the real chill begins. When Meghan crossed the threshold from carpet to cocktail space, she thought the worst was over. She assumed that once inside, once the cameras stopped flashing and the exclusivity of the room kicked in, she'd be welcomed, pulled into circles, whispered about as the guest that made the night bigger. But instead, she was ignored, deliberately, gracefully, utterly. And if you've ever experienced the kind of rejection that doesn't come with words, but with absence, you know how devastating that silence can be. She stood near the bar, alone. A few attendees gave her polite nods, but no conversation started. She sipped champagne, scanned the room, then checked her phone, twice, and no one, not a soul, approached her to pull her into a conversation. For a woman used to being fought over, this was unthinkable. But Meghan wasn't ready to leave. Not yet, because she had one last move to make, one more performance to deliver, and it would trigger the beginning of the end. The smile that broke first. They say a smile is armor. But Meghan's? It started to crack. Not completely, not all at once, but gradually, moment by moment, rejection by rejection. The kind of smile that once hypnotized the press, once drew Megxit headlines and earned $500 million content deals, was failing her. And the cameras, ironically, were catching all of it. A flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The way her jaw tensed as another group turned away. The way she started checking her phone more often, scrolling, tapping, pausing longer than normal. Was she waiting for someone to say, "Come sit with us"? Was she texting someone to get her out of there? Or worse, was she realizing she'd miscalculated the entire night? The unspoken standoff. You see, this wasn't just about who was invited. It was about power. And Meghan, who once had more media power than any woman in the world, was discovering she couldn't command a room with the title alone anymore. She had walked in believing she would be a statement. Instead, she became a cautionary tale, because everyone there knew what she was trying to do. She wasn't attending to celebrate others. She was trying to reclaim the spotlight for herself. But this room? It wasn't designed for that. It was built for voices who had been denied, erased, silenced, not those who had commodified those very stories for personal redemption. That truth hung in the air like perfume, beautiful, invisible, and unmistakably present. The gala begins. The lights dimmed. The awards portion of the night kicked off. Chairs were filled. Cameras rolled. Speeches began. And Meghan? Still without a table. No invitation to sit. No space made for her. No last-minute save. She remained standing near the exit hallway, pretending to check something on her phone, waiting, hoping. But that moment of rescue never came. The producers didn't rush over to guide her to a seat. The hosts didn't acknowledge her in the welcome speech. The stage lights didn't glance her way. It was a quiet freeze-out, one that needed no microphone, no confrontation, just absence. Then came the soundbite. It was during the third speech of the evening, given by an emerging actor, fresh off a breakout indie film that centered on Black identity and authenticity. He took the mic, grinned, looked into the crowd, and said, "I'm proud to be part of a movement where we live the story. We don't just perform it. We've carried it, survived it, created it. And nobody's gonna hijack that narrative from us ever again. The room erupted in applause. But not Meghan. Her hands didn't move. Her face didn't shift. Because she knew. She knew those words weren't generic. They weren't poetic. They were a dart. A direct one. One aimed straight at her. The realization. This was no longer awkwardness. It was rejection. Intentional. Unified. Choreographed in its restraint. And it finally sank in. She wasn't part of this narrative. She wasn't being misunderstood. She was being excluded. On purpose. Because she hadn't earned the room. She had tried to enter it like a spotlight, but never carried the torch herself. And now, the darkness was swallowing her presence whole. Final attempt, the silent plea. As the speech ended, Meghan made her move. She approached a table in the back, one that hadn't yet filled. A group of lesser-known producers and indie writers. People she assumed might still be impressed. Or at least flattered. She smiled, tilted her head. The classic "may I join you" glance. But they hesitated. They shuffled chairs, looked at the table marker, and one quietly said, "I think this one's reserved." Meghan froze, nodded, stepped away, and that was the moment her assistant appeared again, eyes wide, breathing quick. He leaned in, whispered something, and Meghan blinked. Once, twice, then turned toward the exit. She didn't even finish the drink. The half-finished champagne flute remained on the side counter. Her assistant followed close behind. The red dress swept past quiet tables, awkwardly turned shoulders, and murmured glances. No one clapped. No one stood. No one reached out. It was a procession without a send-off. A performance without an audience. A story unraveling in real time. And as she reached the door, the security guard, already waiting, opened it for her, wordlessly. She stepped outside. Into silence. Into the night. Into defeat. But outside, things were about to explode. Because the cameras were still rolling. And what they captured in the next 5 minutes would become the most controversial footage of Meghan Markle's Hollywood era. It started with whispers. Quiet. Calculated. Softer than scandal. Sharper than a slap. Long before Meghan Markle was ushered toward the exit. Long before the red dress faded into the shadows of the Gala's back doors, something far more lethal was already circulating. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a headline. It was something far more dangerous in Hollywood. A reputation unraveling in real time. Not on social media, not in tabloids, but in the room. Where power is wielded not by what you say, but by what you don't say. The group text heard around the ballroom. It began in the hands of a junior stylist. Someone barely out of their 20s. New to the industry, but sharp. Always watching. She spotted Meghan arriving, clocked her immediately, and typed 5 words into her group chat. "Y'all, she really came." 4 dots followed. And just like that, it spread. The chat wasn't just with stylists. It had a Netflix assistant, a fashion house rep, a publicist for an award-nominated actress, and, allegedly, a staffer for one of the show's honorees. Within minutes, the messages multiplied. "She really thinks this is her moment. LOL, she needs this photo op bad. I swear she wasn't on the list. Don't let her next to redacted. She'll try to make it look like they're besties. She's shopping for pity, not partners." Screenshots of Meghan at the bar. Meghan alone on the carpet. Meghan rejected at the table. All sent. All saved. All leaked, eventually. But inside that room, they were devastatingly effective. Whispers become warnings. One young actor, fresh off a breakout streaming series, allegedly asked his handler, "Are we allowed to ask her to leave?" It wasn't a joke. Because by this point, it was clear. Meghan wasn't a guest. She was a narrative hazard. Not because she was dangerous, but because she was off-brand. For an event celebrating real, earned Black excellence in storytelling. Meghan's presence felt less like solidarity and more like a strategy. An opportunist dressed in red. And people in that room? They weren't falling for it. Not her movement. An award-winning producer, who will remain unnamed but was honored that very night, allegedly said this to her table. "She didn't build this room. She can't just walk in and act like she owns it." Another, speaking even more bluntly, "We fought too hard for this space to be someone else's rebrand opportunity." Those words, they weren't shared on a podcast. They weren't typed into a tweet. They were whispered, woman to woman, table to table. The kind of backroom chatter that doesn't stay in the backroom. the kind that ends careers. The assistant who blew it open. And then came the leak. Somewhere near the end of the awards portion, Meghan's own assistant, clearly flustered, was spotted near the staff area. His phone was out. His voice low. A server overheard it. She needs a photo. Just one. With someone visible. The desperation was evident. He wasn't talking strategy. He was talking damage control. What was supposed to be a surprise success had turned into a PR ghost town. Nobody wanted to stand with her. Nobody wanted their image associated with hers. Not that night. Not anymore. Old allies, new distance. What stung the most? It wasn't the strangers. It was the silence from the ones she used to know. There were people at that gala Meghan had once shared Zoom calls with. Shared panels. Shared photo ops. People who had stood by her side during the Oprah fallout, during the Archetypes debut, even during the Spotify disaster. But tonight, they weren't touching her. One producer walked past her without eye contact. Another, who once co-wrote a piece about Meghan's trailblazing journey, moved her chair further away when Meghan hovered near her table. Even a prominent Black Hollywood publicist, who had previously defended Meghan online, allegedly told a peer. She made her bed. Now she's trying to crash in ours. The unofficial ban. Here's where it gets real. There was no official statement. No security alert. No public announcement. But according to multiple accounts, a silent decision was made. Don't engage. Let her linger. Let her feel it. Let her realize this wasn't a place she could just walk into and center herself. And Meghan felt it. Oh, she felt it. That's why the smile faded. That's why her assistant panicked. That's why her exit came sooner than planned. Because the whispers had become walls. Walls she couldn't scale. Not with charm. Not with titles. Not even with tears. And yet, outside those walls, another storm was brewing. Because while Meghan was unraveling inside the room, someone outside had a camera pointed in just the right direction. And the footage they captured would be impossible to spin. The parking lot truth lens. The velvet ropes, the flashing bulbs, the politely veiled daggers of a gala ballroom. All those faded once Meghan stepped through the exit doors. And as she disappeared into the humid Los Angeles night, there was one thing she didn't account for. One detail that no red dress, no royal past, no PR handler could control. A paparazzo with a long lens and a longer memory, stationed across the street, hidden in the shadows. He'd seen her arrive, seen the non-reactions. And he kept his camera trained on her, long after the applause inside had moved on. And what he captured wasn't glamour. It was raw desperation, no longer performing. The moment Meghan crossed the threshold from the event hall to the waiting valet, something shifted. Her shoulders dropped. Her eyes darted. She wasn't acting anymore. There was no crowd to charm, no producers to impress. She was a woman in a red dress, suddenly stripped of context. And she was spiraling. The assistant tried to catch up, whispering something in her ear. Meghan turned. Snapped might be a better word, and waved him off. No smiles. No soft composure. Just visible panic. One hand clutched her clutch like a shield. The other went to her phone. Fumbling. Searching. Texting. For what? For who? Nobody knows. But nobody replied fast enough. The assistant slipped up. Caught off guard. Her assistant stepped aside to make a call. That's when the camera caught his face. Pale. Sweating. Mouthing a single sentence, almost too quiet to hear. Except the footage got it. This is bad. For syllables that shattered the Markle media illusion. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't a misunderstood appearance. This was a misfire. A total loss. And inside that car, still nowhere in sight, Meghan waited for a way out. But the night wasn't done with her yet. Witnesses on the move. As she stood by the valet station, trying to stay composed, several guests from the gala filtered out. Not many. But enough. A few quick glances. A hushed comment. Someone muttered, "I told you so." Another covered their mouth to stifle a laugh. No one approached. No one offered help. No one said goodbye. And Meghan? She didn't speak. She just stood there, frozen, lips tight, the red dress suddenly feeling like a bullseye. The final betrayal, a friend filming. Now here's where it gets brutal. Someone, rumored to be a former Meghan ally, was also outside. They weren't part of the press. Not officially. But they were recording. A vertical phone video. Just a few seconds. But enough to show Meghan turning away from a passing guest. One who did get hugged, greeted, and swept into conversation. Meghan, in contrast, was bypassed like background noise. And in the clip, a whisper, barely audible, just 2 words. She's spiraling. The video would never make it to TMZ. Not directly, but it would be passed along. First in group chats, then in DMs, then in private press circles. And it would eventually leak into the bloodstream of Hollywood gossip. Damage control in real time. Still outside, still waiting for her ride, Meghan got on the phone. Not texting this time, calling. And while we can't hear her words in the video, we can see her mouth them. Frustrated, rushed, urgent, hands flying, head turning. She looks like someone trying to stop a wildfire with a perfume bottle. And the man across the street keeps filming. Not maliciously, not gleefully, just quietly. Like a journalist who knows this moment means something. Something bigger than just a failed photo op. The car pulls up. Finally, the black SUV. Late, silent, unremarkable. No paparazzi rush. No crowd of fans. Just Meghan, her assistant, and a half-broken PR strategy. She slides in, closes the door, doesn't look back. But the world would still be watching. Because what she didn't know, couldn't have known, was that within hours, the footage would be in inboxes. That text from inside the gala would be screenshot and leaked. That celebrities, quietly furious about her presence, would begin pulling their social media mentions. That publicists would start whispering a new warning. If she shows up at your event next, make sure you know why. Reputation isn't just built in front of cameras. Sometimes, it crumbles behind closed doors. And that night, Meghan didn't just lose face. She lost the benefit of the doubt. The very thing that had carried her through controversies, scandals, and royal drama for half a decade. Gone. All because she stepped into a room that wasn't hers and tried to center herself in someone else's story. But if you thought this was the fallout, you're wrong. Because the moment that truly shook Hollywood still hadn't happened. It came days later, when one woman, one icon, decided enough was enough, and issued a statement that ended the illusion once and for all. When Viola Davis stops clapping, you should start worrying. That quote wasn't written in a magazine. It wasn't a headline. It was a whisper, passed quietly between 2 veteran actors at table 4 as the tension in the ballroom began to coil tighter than a corset around a lie. Because while Meghan Markle was still holding court in the periphery, smiling for invisible cameras, sipping untouched champagne, glancing at tables that no one invited her to, something had already shifted. Something seismic. And it all began with a look. From one woman, who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. Viola Davis didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The look that said everything. You don't need to be a Hollywood insider to know who Viola Davis is. She's not just an Oscar-winning actress. She's a force. A woman who has spent her entire career fighting for representation, respect, and roles that didn't come with a side order of stereotype. When Viola walks into a space, the room adjusts. It listens. So when Meghan tried to lock eyes with her across the banquet hall that night, perhaps in search of an ally, a nod, a moment of silent solidarity, Viola didn't respond. She looked away. No smile. No fake warmth. Just a calm, deliberate turn of the head. And in that moment, the air shifted. Because people were watching. They always watch Viola. And when she signals discomfort, it ripples. The table of truth. Here's what most people outside the gala never saw. Viola wasn't alone. Her table? A constellation of black brilliance. Writers, directors, producers, legacy figures, rising stars. All of them had stories. All of them had scars. And when Meghan walked by, lingering just long enough to be noticed, nobody moved. Nobody offered a seat. Nobody smiled wider to ease the awkwardness. They simply kept talking, as if she wasn't there. That silence was louder than a headline, and Meghan felt it. Her posture stiffened. Her chin lifted. The smile faltered just slightly. She moved on, but the wall had already formed. What Viola allegedly said backstage. Now, the next part hasn't been confirmed by any official record, but it doesn't need to be. Because 3 separate sources, all insiders, say Viola approached one of the event organizers privately during a break between awards. And she didn't shout. She simply said, "Protect this space." 3 words. Simple. Devastating. Utterly clear. Not, "Remove her." Not, "How dare you." Not, "This is unacceptable." Just a warning. A reminder that this gala, This celebration wasn't a red carpet free-for-all. It wasn't a playground for people in search of relevance. It was a sanctuary for real storytellers, for those who had earned their place. And Meghan? She hadn't. The unspoken pact. After Viola's quiet exchange, something strange began to happen. Tables began closing in, figuratively and literally. Chairs moved. Conversations tightened. Body language shifted. Several prominent actresses moved to sit beside each other, forming a kind of visual barrier between Meghan and the main tables. Photographers, sensing tension, pulled back. And the celebrities who usually chase a moment for exposure backed away. Because in this town, if Viola quietly signals discomfort, you follow. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Kerry Washington's calculated distance. Another name floated in the backstage buzz. Kerry Washington. Elegant. Poised. Respected. She had shared panels with Meghan in the past. Even spoken about allyship and media double standards. But on this night, she kept her distance. When asked by a journalist pre-gala whether Meghan was attending, Kerry allegedly smiled and said, "Oh, I wouldn't know." Deliberate neutrality. The kind that's more powerful than a no. And when she passed Meghan near the drink station later in the night, she offered a gentle nod, then moved on. A photographer later joked, "It was like watching ships pass in the night, but one of them had a hole in the hull." Tracy Ellis Ross, the laugh that echoed. And then there was Tracy. Iconic. Sharp. Known for her biting wit and effortless charisma. When Meghan was spotted trying to approach a circle of actresses, including Tracy, something happened. Someone whispered a comment, inaudible to onlookers. And Tracy? She let out a laugh. Not cruel, not mocking, but unmistakably dismissive. A laugh that said, "Oh, that's what we're doing now." Meghan froze. Her expression tightened. She didn't approach. She turned. Again. A wall, not a room. You see, Meghan expected a room. A space. A stage. What she got was a wall. A wall built by legacy. By pain. By resilience. By those who had fought to get there. Not coasted on controversy or courted outrage. And no amount of dresses, documentaries, or Duchess titles could buy her a door through it. Not tonight. Not here. But Meghan wasn't going to walk away quietly. No. Because if the room wouldn't give her validation, she'd force it into the headlines. And in doing so, she'd make the mistake that would ignite an industry-wide backlash. The PR button Meghan shouldn't have pressed. By the time Meghan made it to the SUV waiting outside, the unspoken message had reached her loud and clear. But instead of reflection, she reached for retaliation. Within 30 minutes of leaving the venue, sources confirm her team had already begun working the phones. Calls to tabloids. Calls to gossip editors. A short press release prepared in the Notes app and formatted for quick syndication. The headline? Meghan Markle makes surprise appearance at Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV gala, stunning in red. But the truth? There was nothing stunning about it. Because the only thing Meghan had done that night was trigger a collective cultural immune response. And the PR spin? It would backfire faster than anyone expected. The industry was already talking. Even before the gossip blogs received Meghan's team's version of events, whispers had turned to text chains. One studio exec reportedly messaged, "That was embarrassing. Why would she even show up there?" A top Black screenwriter replied, "Because she thought we needed her validation." Another added, "This isn't the palace. We're not afraid to say no." And then came the screenshots. From inside the ballroom. From staff. From stylists. From junior assistants who had nothing to lose. Messages like, "Did y'all see Viola dodge her like the plague? She really tried to crash the main table skull. They said she's spinning it already LOL." Within hours, Twitter, or rather, the post-Elon X, was on fire with cryptic subtweets. No names. Just tone. "We built this house brick by brick. Don't show up with a hammer and call it contribution. Visibility doesn't equal vulnerability. Stop confusing them. Some people wear red because they're confident. Others wear it so they can't see the blood on their reputation." It wasn't just rejection. It was a cultural pushback. And Meghan? She was on the wrong side of it. A gala that wasn't hers to claim. The biggest mistake Meghan made wasn't walking into a room where she wasn't wanted. It was trying to make it about her, when the night was about everyone else. This gala wasn't a backdrop for reinvention. It wasn't a red carpet for reputation rehab. It was a room of Black creators finally being seen on their own terms. And Meghan? She came to borrow that visibility, to tie herself to something real, to remind people she once cried on Oprah's couch. But this wasn't the Oprah crowd. This was the earned every inch crowd. And they didn't forget how long Meghan had distanced herself from Black identity, until she needed it. The movement tourist accusation. It started as a whisper, then it became a phrase, then a thread with hundreds of retweets. Movement tourist. Not a leader, not an ally, a visitor, a passer-through, someone who wants to take photos at the protest, but leaves before cleanup. Someone who quotes bell hooks, but doesn't read the last chapter. Someone who uses identity as a weapon when under attack, but drops it the second it becomes inconvenient. And for many in the Black creative community, that's how Meghan had come to be seen. Not as a fraud, but as a visitor. Someone who never lived the story, but wanted to direct the sequel. The sound that said it all. Later that week, a video clip surfaced. Not from inside the gala, but from backstage. It was only 6 seconds long. Viola Davis, holding her award, standing with 3 other honorees, laughing. Someone off camera brings up what happened earlier. The voice is hard to identify. Viola stops, smiles, and says, "Baby, some people need to remember, this ain't their movement." The room laughs. The clip ends. No names mentioned, but everybody knew. The aftershock. In the days that followed, 2 publications that initially posted Meghan's press team's version quietly retracted the guest of honor mention. A leading Black culture podcast devoted a segment to dissecting when performative allyship crosses the line. Several rising Black actresses untagged themselves from photos where Meghan appeared in the background. Meghan's surprise appearance became a joke at a private Netflix wrap party, complete with someone showing up in a red gown and pretending to be lost. And the worst part? Silence. Not from trolls, not from critics, but from the people who had once stood by her. Oprah, Serena, Ava, Gayle. Not one post, not one quote, not even a quiet like. Because in Hollywood, when you're really being iced out, no one shouts. They just go quiet. And that silence is final. But Meghan had one card left, and she would play it in the worst way possible. A last-ditch attempt at reclaiming the narrative. That would lead to one of the most explosive PR collapses of her career. What happens when you stand to clap and no one claps with you? That's not a rhetorical question. That's not a metaphor. That's exactly what happened to Meghan Markle the night she tried to stage her silent comeback at the 8th Critics' Choice celebration of Black cinema and TV. And it all hinged on one moment. One speech. One standing ovation that left her standing alone. Because if the cold shoulders and silent stares hadn't made it clear enough, what unfolded during that brief but unforgettable 5-minute window under the stage lights would become the symbolic death of the Markle myth in modern Hollywood. And the most brutal part? She thought it was her moment. She misread the room. Again. And this time, everyone saw it. The setup, a speech that had nothing to do with her. The speech wasn't about Meghan. Not directly. It came during the final stretch of the award ceremony, a time when the room was already emotionally charged, glasses half full, conversations dimmed, attention fully back on the stage. A rising screenwriter had just received a Breakout Achievement Award. Mid-30s, LA-born, fiercely vocal, and unapologetically committed to telling stories about race, trauma, joy, and survival, without apology, without sugarcoating, and without needing permission. She took the stage wearing a midnight blue gown, her speech prepared but from the heart. And she said something that would hang in the air like incense and accusation. I was told for years that my stories were too specific, too niche, too real. But I realized they weren't too real. They were too Black, too female, too raw for a system that prefers a sanitized version of our pain. The room lit up. Claps, cheers, murmurs of that part. Tonight, I stand here not because I played the game, but because I broke it. Applause swelled again. She paused, looked around, and then dropped the line that would become the night's most quoted, most shared, most dissected sentence. We are no one's accessory. We are no one's redemption arc. And we are damn sure not your diversity filter. And that was the moment Meghan stood. The clap that shattered the illusion. Until that point, Meghan had remained relatively still at her table near the back. She wasn't clapping loudly. She wasn't trying to draw attention. But when that line hit, "We are no one's accessory," something flickered in her eyes, as if she believed the moment belonged to her too. She stood. She clapped. Firmly. Repeatedly. Confidently. She looked toward the stage, smiling, nodding in affirmation, as if to say, "I agree. This is what I stand for too." But the room? It stayed seated. People glanced sideways. Someone near her tilted their head. A waiter, awkwardly caught mid-pour, hesitated before lowering the bottle to the table. Meghan's assistant, standing just beside the curtain, flinched. It was the most awkward standing ovation in recent awards show memory, because no one joined her. Not a single person. And that moment was caught. Two angles. One disaster. Two guests recorded it. The first, a film blogger seated 3 tables away, had been capturing snippets of the night for a behind-the-scenes reel. In their footage, Meghan is clearly seen rising while others remain seated, clapping hard as the speaker on stage continues. The second, a fashion columnist live-streaming discreetly to their small subscriber base. They captured her expression. From the side, the slow realization creeping across Meghan's face that her applause wasn't being echoed, that she was alone in that gesture, not celebrated, not praised, isolated. And in Hollywood, isolation isn't just uncomfortable, it's fatal. Why it backfired so badly? You might be asking, why was that such a big deal? After all, isn't clapping supportive? Isn't standing a sign of respect? Normally, yes, but not in this case. Because the speech wasn't meant for Meghan. It wasn't about her. It wasn't a defense of her narrative. And it sure wasn't a coded call for her to reclaim the spotlight. The line, "We are no one's accessory," was, in fact, a repudiation of everything Meghan had tried to do that night. Her presence, her positioning, her PR play. It wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. And by clapping like the speech was a tribute rather than a challenge, Meghan had exposed what everyone already suspected. She thought she was the protagonist in a story that wasn't hers. And once again, she made it about herself. Audience reaction, a case study in controlled rejection. You want to know what real power looks like? It's a room full of stars choosing not to react. Not booing. Not glaring. Just refusing. Refusing to rise. Refusing to validate the moment. Refusing to let her co-opt a speech meant to affirm the creators who were finally getting their turn on stage without being framed through the lens of victimhood for profit. And that silence? It spoke volumes. One actress was heard muttering, "She really thinks this is about her." Another simply sipped her drink and said, "Girl." No follow-up. No context. Just, "Girl." That's all it took. The onstage reaction. Even the speaker herself seemed surprised. She glanced at Meghan, paused, then continued without acknowledging the moment. That was the real mic drop. Because not only was Meghan left standing, she was ignored by the very woman whose speech she tried to attach herself to. Brutal. Effortless. Devastating. The social media storm, coming soon. At the time, few in the wider public knew what had happened. But within minutes of the gala ending, that clip was being passed around in WhatsApp groups, press circles, DM chains. Nobody needed to say what it meant. They all saw it, and they knew what was coming next. Because when a woman tries to turn your story into her spotlight, the blowback is just a matter of time. But Meghan wasn't done trying. Because the next day, she would do what she always does when cornered. She'd run to the press. She'd flip the story. She'd cry victim. And this time, nobody would be buying it. She should have felt it. The glances, the stiff smiles, the echoing silence between conversations. But Meghan didn't back down. She couldn't. Because in her mind, she hadn't crashed this party. She belonged at it. Maybe even deserved to be the centerpiece. After all, hadn't she risked it all for her truth? Hadn't she been publicly dragged, scrutinized, and othered by the British media? Hadn't she cried in Oprah's garden about the loneliness of being a black woman in a white institution? Didn't that earn her something? But here, at this gala, those receipts didn't count. Not tonight. Because here, the people in the room weren't guests of a royal fairy tale. They were creators of their own crowns. And one by one, they made it clear. This wasn't her coronation. The rising murmur. As the night progressed, the murmur turned into something more potent. Resistance. Small groups huddled closer together, not letting Meghan into their orbit. Publicists watched with growing discomfort, Trying to calculate whether proximity to her was a brand risk. Several stylists, spotting the rising tension, made emergency texts. Do not post her photo with our client. Pull the tag. Now. And then came the text from inside the room. They flew faster than the camera flashes. Messages sent to friends. Screenshots snapped of Meghan's positioning. Comments like, "She really tried it. This ain't her night. Somebody better pull her before this gets messy." One recipient, an influencer with a large following, posted a cryptic tweet that would later go viral. "If you weren't part of the fight, don't show up for the parade." No names mentioned, but everybody knew. The flashpoint moment. Then came the moment that tipped the whole night over the edge. Meghan, after being quietly frozen out from most conversations, made a bold move. She walked, confidently, toward the main table, the one reserved for honorees, producers, and major award recipients. Not to sit, but to hover. She smiled, offered a light comment, reached out to touch the shoulder of a director who had just received a standing ovation for a film about intergenerational trauma in the Black community. And the director flinched. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for it to be caught on camera. Enough for everyone around them to pause. To see it. Meghan's smile didn't falter, but her eyes changed. Just for a second. She stepped back, turned, and that's when he stepped in.